Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show, little pop-up emergency podcast episode for you guys because the Vikings have agreed to terms with Nolan Teasley to be their new general manager. If you're watching on YouTube, you're probably like, what is this background? We are not used to this. I am actually back home for a quick little engagement party, but not going to miss an opportunity to talk about this a little bit with you guys. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart, hopefully it sounds the same as this thing always does. This show, which we do 2 times a week in much more of a longer format, is presented by First Resource Bank, a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. It's also sponsored by ProMN Athletics, a company based in Minnesota run by 3 guys, Kurt, Graham, and Tanner, that want to lift the tide of youth development and youth football in Minnesota. So been awesome to partner with those guys. They've got academies. They've got 7-on-7 leagues in the summer. I know they're having a kind of an event with Tanner Morgan, the former Gophers quarterback. And so their information is going to be in the description. But we are here today. If you haven't read it, theathletic.com have a story up and had it up pretty immediately on the Vikings hiring or agreeing to terms with Nolan Teasley, and updated the story late on Saturday afternoon with perspective from a lot of people in the industry, scouts, executives, agents, people who were familiar, I'd say, with this hiring process. So go check that out, The Athletic, or listen, I guess, to the next however many minutes we talk here on this show. So you guys probably have a lot of questions. For those of you who haven't followed this search, it's been a lengthy one. There's no question about it. The Vikings waited until after the draft, which was interesting in the eyes of a lot of people around the league. And they had Rob Brzezinski shepherd the thing, working with the coaching staff throughout the spring, essentially. And Rob managed it effectively. I mean, the people internally were really happy with the way that process went. And so as the Vikings charted their interview process for this job once the draft ended, they began with about a couple handfuls of candidates. Rob Brzezinski was one of them. Another one was, from the outset, was Nolan Teasley, who, 42 years old, has been with Seattle his entire career. He is a native of Ellsberg, Washington, which from my quick study is a kind of a small town southeast of Seattle. I was going through the archives a little bit on Saturday morning, and Nolan Teasley was a running back. I think there was a game I saw written about at one point that was it was supposed to. I think he ran for 300 or something yards as a running back, so he played running back, and then was recruited to Central Washington, where he played in college. Then graduated, I believe, with a public relations degree and worked in corporate marketing for 6 years. 6 years in, I think he's wanted to follow his passion, got in as a scouting intern with the Seattle Seahawks in 2013, and really rose the ranks there, working with an organization that has obviously had a ton of success. He went from intern to pro scout to managing pro personnel, and then became an assistant GM a few years ago, working with John Schneider, who is unquestionably one of the best football executives, best professional football executives, has built 2 iterations of Super Bowl winning teams. And the Vikings as an organization, just having conversations today, like, they have a ton of respect for John, who has ties to Minnesota, obviously, for John, who again, built 2 different Super Bowl types of runs, who has worked with different head coaches, different head coaching styles, who is kind of a scout at heart, but definitely understands all of the dynamics, I would say, that an organization encompasses when you talk about athletic performance, when you talk about analytics, when you talk about college scouting, professional scouting, all of these, components. Like, these things are an organization. That's why I think sometimes people don't understand. People just want the general manager who is the super scout. And one of the things that irks me oftentimes is even a guy like John Schneider goes through stretches of his career where they're not hitting at a crazy rate. And ultimately, the job, it's in name, it's general manager. You are managing people. You are directing different aspects of an organization. You have to be someone who has a breadth of knowledge in a ton of areas to get people alongside you and maintain faith and respect through both the good and the bad. And so that requires a lot of feel, it requires a lot of expertise. All of those things were so much of what the Vikings as an organization were looking for with this specific hire. And so, Mark Wilf multiple times talked about wanting to land on a leader, someone who could bridge a lot of areas of the organization. So, the Vikings went through their first interview process, which was a stretch of virtual interviews that included a bunch of members of the ownership group and their children, a couple of their kids, Kevin O'Connell, Andrew Miller, the COO, etc. Eventually, the Vikings chiseled that list down to 5 in-person candidates. That all happened this past week from Tuesday to Thursday. It was Rob Brzezinski. It was John McKay, the AGM in Los Angeles. It was Nolan Teasley, obviously, the AGM in Seattle. Terrence Gray, the assistant GM in Buffalo. And then Reed Burkhardt, the assistant GM with Denver. And ownership exited the building Thursday afternoon and deliberated from there. And what, again, has been a very lengthy process. And ultimately on Saturday settled on the idea of Nolan Teasley being a perfect tandem alongside Rob Brzezinski and Kevin O'Connell. And so I think that kind of segues into a couple components and elements of this hire that I think are important to consider. First and foremost, with Rob Brzezinski, I've been saying for a couple weeks now that I expected Rob Brzezinski to still have a massive say in this organization and a massive just like leadership role within the organization moving forward, regardless of what happens. Rob is best known to people on the outside or Vikings fans as like the cap expert. But what he really is, he's the lead negotiator. He's been a connector internally. He's someone who Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings coaching staff has had a lot of trust in, has put a lot of faith in. And so the Vikings coming out of this process, regardless of what the title ended up being, I know they've wanted to remain very committed to the idea that Rob Brzezinski matters and is pivotal in this team getting to where they want to go, which is the lofty level at which Seattle has been twice, obviously in the last decade. And so, I fully expect Rob's expertise, again, from the cap side, from the negotiating side, and from just an institutional understanding and knowledge perspective. I fully expect him to, and I think he should have a massive role in this operation moving forward. And then Kevin O'Connell, who just given a lot of the dynamics with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah early in Kwesi's time in 2022 and 23, Kevin O'Connell started to, have a massive influence on personnel. And I never expected coming out of this that Kevin O'Connell's say would in some ways be minimized. And so, and Kevin O'Connell knows what is best for his system, probably as well as anybody. And so the idea of having these 3 guys in a tandem makes a ton of sense. And the question, I'd say, as part of that conversation, where my mind goes from there is, okay, so what happens now from a front office perspective? Do the Vikings feel like from a scouting staff, pro scouting, college scouting, they need to revamp that a little bit, or will they take a similar tack to the one that they did when they hired an external candidate in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah 4 years ago, where he entered with not a ton of obviously leeway in terms of what he could do from a staffing perspective. And so like that is one of the biggest questions. I also think, as for the first conversation, who reports to who is a massive question. Who has final authority on the roster? Those are massive questions that will be asked, obviously, when ownership and a lot of these guys meet with the media, I expect here in many ways shortly. But I do, and I've had people in the league, a lot of people ask, like, does this mean they are going to adjust their scouting staff? And then by extension, well, this is a time of year where a lot of scouts and evaluators have maintained kind of their contract or circumstances with their current organization. So what is the flexibility going to be if the Vikings want to reorganize things in some form or fashion? I mean, these are all very in the weeds questions, but I, as you guys know, pride myself on trying to bring the answers. First of all, just like the inside of what it actually looks like and feels like on a daily basis, and then just what's important for an organization that, I've written this, hasn't made the conference championships since 2017, hasn't won a playoff game since 2019. These are expectations that ownership has, that you guys have. And so for me, it's incumbent upon myself to make sure that those questions are asked that hold people accountable to get to the place at which that can happen on a consistent basis. There's no doubt, like I said, the Vikings' respect for John Schneider factored prominently in this, but so did Nolan Teasley's just experience level. You talk to a bunch of, a lot of the agents, player agents know who he is. A lot of scouts and evaluators, I think, throughout the league are aware and think highly of him as a really good dude, first and foremost, but also someone who, the word patient was used. The word calm was used, just kind of an ability to ascertain information and make really smart decisions. And that includes, I think there's a perception because the Vikings moved on from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, they wanted to run as far away from data as possible. One of the things in talking to people about Nolan Teasley is he does have an understanding of the data. It's not his, foremost, how he entered the space. But I do think he worked very closely with that front office in Seattle to try to bridge tape evaluation and data insights. And I think if you're going to be at the top of the league in terms of pushing things forward, that should be an incorporating piece as part of it. So, when you initially hear about the hire, the first kind of phrase was strong football acumen. So, it's a really interesting hire. He's obviously definitely one of the true external voice was what someone within the league, believed with this hire. And then Kevin O'Connell and John Schneider, the Seahawks GM, have had a really good relationship for a long time. I know before the Sam Darnold signing last offseason, they definitely had conversations as part of that. So the crossover and touch points definitely make sense. And then again, now comes the questions and the next phase of things in terms of, what does the grading scale look like? Meaning, are they going to change kind of what they seek, how they grade players? Because that stuff matters. And the Vikings are, this is a time of year where you're about to get ready for the fall. You're about to get ready for your, preseason, free agency, preseason, and college season evaluation. So it is incumbent upon the team to be very, I'd say, regimented with just what their processes are. And so I expect that to involve meetings over the next few days, weeks, months, etc., to kind of start to blend the perspective that they want to incorporate from Nolan Teasley. But interesting hire, fascinating hire with a lot of layers to it. Definitely expect the trio of Rob Brzezinski, Nolan Teasley, Kevin O'Connell to work very close together. And we'll be back, obviously, with more later this week. If there's a press conference or if there's a practice, what have you. Any questions you have, I'd say throw them at me in the comment section. Throw them at me on social media, at Alec_Lewis. Show's also sponsored by Great Clips. We've appreciated their support the last couple weeks. You can't really see my full hair because we don't have the full recording, I would say, equipment that we're used to. We've got pink chairs back here if you're watching on YouTube, but just wanted to get a touch point with you guys in before things continue to probably ramp up over this week. So appreciate you guys being here for emergency episode number 172, 15 minutes down. And we will talk to you very, very soon.